Hello. In this video, I am trying to encapsulate all the different topics of technology for MIS and try to sum up what all discussion that has happened in this chapter. You have already heard the presentations made by your colleagues, and in those presentations we learnt about several technologies. This also gave you the idea to research about a particular topic and find out more about this. And this is important for two reasons. Number one is that the technologies themselves keep evolving over a period of time, and no matter how well you have studied it, you need to keep up to date with the developments in that field. The second reason is that nobody is going to be perfect or well versed with all the technologies. So there will be areas in which you may know things about, and there will be areas about which we do not know. So this was an exercise in trying to find information. Some of the things which I thought could have been done a little more, probably through in-person classes, that is possible, maybe not in online ones, was to be able to get views of your peers about whether your understanding was perfect or not. So that is something which we need to do in real life as a manager before we implement a technology solution or we are considering a technology solution. Now, through this video, I will try to cover up some of the aspects where these things get used or how these can be used in practice. We have seen some of these topics, so I will not be talking about individual topic. What I start with is to give in one canvas how different technologies are and how they have been evolving. So this is that slide. I have divided different technologies into four parts. Number one is hardware, number two is operating system, number three is applications, and number four is data storage and management of data. And the evolution in the information systems has been there for last almost 60-70 years. So you see the first column that talks about different eras that have come in the information system. Number one, we have the mainframe era. You might have heard of some of the very basic computers, UNIVACs and other computers which were huge, the size of a classroom or sometimes the size of a building, all filled with the mainframe computers. These computers were not directly accessible. You had to access them through a terminal, and back in the days, I think up until 1970s, the terminal would be card readers and printers. There was no concept of a computer terminal and a keyboard. So this was that time. The typical operating systems in that period were one was by IBM, Unix had just started, and there was something called as time sharing operating system, which allowed different users to upload their programs at different times and at the time of their convenience, but the actual run on the mainframe would happen as per allotted time only, and the time on the server was very expensive. My professors used to tell that they had to fill up a requisition well in advance, sometimes weeks, sometimes months in advance, for maybe 1 hour, half an hour of time on the server. So that's how rare this resource was, and all of this for a very nominal processing performance. It's not that they were supercomputers or something. They were some probably their processing capacity was less than a modern smartphone. All the applications were custom written, so these were programs. You had to know something called as Fortran, formula translation language, or other languages to be able to make use of any of these computers, and all these were text based. There was no concept of GUI or any such thing. Some of the early applications had started to evolve at the enterprise level, things like manufacturing resources planning or material resources planning. So there were some software available which were used at more than one companies and by more than one users, whereas most other things were custom written programs. I have worked on these. There was a Fortran 77 and then came a Fortran 90 and whatnot. So all these were very basic calculations, but they were very useful in engineering calculations. Say your numerical methods or solving some of these partial differential equations. These were very useful. Data storage used to happen in either magnetic tapes or, as I said, those punched cards. The structure of data was what we call as flat files, and these were the file itself would not have any structure. It would be a running file, one character after another. It's like a book, but without the names of a chapter or page numbers. So it would just be a continuous stream of text or characters. And if you had to read, let us say, 100th page of the book, there was no way. You had to read through all the characters and reach until that point and then read that. So that was how difficult it was. Next came the PC era or the personal computing era in the 1980s. Companies like Compaq and Apple, they started making these computers which were usable by an individual person. So there was instead of the time sharing concept earlier, now a computer was available to a person. So one of the landmark products in that period is IBM PC, which came with many versions, PC-80 and PC-XT and whatnot. And there are other companies also which made PCs, but then they had to be compatible with IBM PC, because all the software and data storage and everything was designed as per IBM PC. So the operating system was Microsoft DOS, text-based. Linux had just started to come up. Windows also had started to come up. I think 1986 was when the first Windows came in. We had started to get some more applications. For example, Word for Perfect. I remember seeing something called as Word Star. Then Lotus 123, which is an equivalent of Microsoft Excel. There was also some other products from Office products from Lotus, and a lot of applications were developed in-house. So when I worked with a company called as Pratt & Whitney Aircraft Engines, they had something called as a state-of-the-art performance program, which was a text-based calculation software, but they back then called it state-of-the-art, and it was developed in-house. There were probably around 25,000 lines of code, all doing only engineering calculations, but it was an in-house application used by multiple people, and not every user was a programmer. There were programmers who were using it, and there were non-programmers who were also using it. So this was the era of personal computers. We had started seeing these hard disks, the floppy disks, including 5-inch and 3.5-inch and all that. We started seeing some form of database management. So now we did not have only flat files, but we started seeing databases which had some structure. So going back to the textbook example, we had started seeing chapters, table of content, page numbers, and so on, which were not there in the mainframe era. Next comes the client server era, in which these PCs had started now being connected to a server. So you would see typical hardware was a personal computer on a Novell network. So Novell network was kind of an operating system which kind of sold both a server and a PC. So you had to buy one server and maybe 10 or 15 PCs, and then you could set up your whole system, but the whole purchase has to happen from one supplier, otherwise it wouldn't work. So this was the configuration. You had a Linux server or a Windows server. You had Windows 2000 server, and some equivalent things had started coming. So Windows 2000 server came much late. The other servers used to be either Unix based or Linux based. Then we had some more applications had started to come now, and you had started to get these applications in boxes. So if you had to buy Microsoft Office, you buy the CD which would come in a box. That's why the concept of boxed software. If you had to take an internet connection, then you had to install their client, and for that also a box would come. So everything, if you were to buy a software, you had to buy a box. So that's why this is called as a boxed software era. One of the landmark items there was Lotus Notes, which is kind of a combination of email and web forum. You see some discussion fora such as Reddit. So this was something similar to that, but a little bit organized and in the control of the company or the organization that is using it. And this was a licensed product, not available on the open and the internet. You had to buy Lotus Notes license both at the server and at the client, that means at the user space. Database servers had started to grow. Now you had multiple databases within an organization. You had maybe the HR maintained database of employees, the production department maintained database of materials and suppliers and so on. Finance department would keep a database of all the transactions that are happening and so on. But all these databases were separate, not talking to each other, and working on the concept of this proper management and storage of data. So this was the client server era, and there are still organizations or use cases which make use of all these. Even if we are in 2021, we have not stopped using PCs. Right? There are, like right now I am recording this video on a PC. So PCs still exist, client servers still exist, but there was an era which started in the late 1980s. Then came the enterprise software era in the mid 90s. This is when the PCs and laptops connected to the intranet of the company. So each and every PC, or at least a majority of the PCs, got connected, but these were within the company, not outside. Then there were multiple operating systems. So for example, someone may be using a Windows based operating system, and another person may be using a Mac, or another person may be using a Linux. Because why? Because their native applications, from the previous era, they may be coming from either a Windows or a PC or a Linux or a Mac, and they continue to use that. So there were multiple operating systems within an organization, and between the server and the client, they may not be the same. So unlike a novel NetWare, where client and the server both had to be purchased from the same company, now you had a situation where your server may be running on Unix or an IBM or some other piece of software, whereas your clients may be running on an altogether different software. And we needed some form of interface between these. Sometimes my laptop is on Windows, but I am accessing servers and other computers on Linux and other places. So you needed some interfaces, and there were companies such as Citrix, CITRIX, which provided solutions to connect one with another. So this was a very interesting period when multiple operating systems were coexisting and sort of talking to each other. It was not very easy, cumbersome, but it had started to happen. Typical applications that got developed in this period, late mid 90s onwards, is SAP, Oracle, PeopleSoft. Then there is something called as Documentum, which helps in managing documents, and so on. Now the concept of enterprise database server had started to evolve, where instead of having the multiple database servers, which is here, we now started having a single database server which had all the applications that the organization was using. So that's the improvement over the previous era. The mid 2000s, we started this Web 2.0. As we have heard from the presentations, now the users are more in charge of the content. It's not no longer someone sitting in the head office deciding what the content would be, and the same changes started happening within the organization also. So as a result, now a lot more people started having access to the company intranet. Laptops got connected through company Wi-Fi or sometimes through VPNs or distance mode also. We continue to have multiple operating systems. The concept of browser apps started, which means now instead of developing interface, I talked about that Citrix and all that, developing interface for each application for each operating system, now I started giving access to different applications through browser, web browser itself. And we know from the evolution of internet that different browsers, right from the time when internet started, 92 or so, it was not browser dependent. It was what we call as browser agnostic. So irrespective of whether you access it from back in those days, Internet Explorer versus Netscape, which was another browser, and there were some others. Mozilla was there back then. Irrespective of which browser you use to access the internet, you would still get the same internet. So that was the power of the programming back then. The architecture used HTML and so on. So now that continues to happen, and now this working between multiple operating systems became easy, because now most apps are browser based apps. You don't have to install a client on your operating system. So that was the next thing. And now the data storage started to happen in remote locations. Instead of having an enterprise database server within my organization, I store it elsewhere. I mean, I may be a multinational with some 20-25 locations of presence. Instead of each location having one database server, I may keep a central database server, which may be within my premises or it may be outside also. I may give it out to a cloud based location. So that's the Web 2.0. I have kept it a little blur deliberately, because that is a very blurred period between the enterprise software and the cloud computing age that we are in now. So in the cloud era, we now have remote servers. Almost all of us don't use servers which are in the same network as our own login or our own device. So these are all remote servers. Now we have clients, and these are operating on multiple hardware. It may be a smartphone, it may be a tablet, it may be a desktop computer, it may be a laptop, or it may be some other forms of devices. For instance, a machine and all that. So all these, and as a result, now you have many more operating systems, Linux, Windows, Android, and so on. You have typical applications such as Salesforce.com. You have applications on Azure, which is Microsoft platform, and Google apps, like we use Google Docs or Google Sheets. Someone might be using Jamboard, or even some of the calling devices like Google Meet. It is another Google app. So all these are typical applications that we see in this cloud era. All the data is now stored on large server farms. It is no longer stored on one server. These are now huge farms. You can search on the internet how they look like. It's like a huge warehouse, like a storage. From outside it would look like a storage warehouse, but it will be fully air conditioned, and inside it's all racks and racks of computers without any display or without any keyboard and all. It's all only the CPUs, and sometimes they don't even keep the casing. They just keep the motherboards one after another, many of them. So that's the cloud computing era that we live in. Now I'll move forward But along with this, you please keep looking at the Moodle where I am giving in-class activity, so that you answer some of the questions, and it gives me gives us all of us an idea about whether we are understanding the whole thing completely, or are there any doubts that are coming in all this. Now moving on, these are so we have got a basic fair understanding of what technology is and how it has been evolving. We have looked at it from 3-4 dimensions, but these are not the only dimensions. We'll be looked at it from the hardware, operating system, the applications, and the data, data management aspect, data storage and data management aspect. But those are not the only. People can look at it from many other ways also. But we need to basically get an idea about where the technology is and what technology can do for us. But what it should do for us, that we will get to know through next 2 to 3 slides. We are basically trying to use technology to get some of these qualities in the MIS. So what are these? Basically we want the accuracy, integrity, consistency, completeness, validity, timeliness, and accessibility from the MIS. So let me briefly explain what it is. Accuracy means am I able to capture the data accurately, or is it getting lost in translation? Right. Integrity, after I capture the data and store it, does it remain that way, or if I check back after 5 days or 10 days, does it change its shape? The data itself gets broken, or sometimes the relationship between, let us say the files are kept at one location and someone is coming and changing the file names. So that means the integrity is not there. The relationship is not sort of robust or solid. Are these consistent? Are we naming all the files in a consistent way, or is someone naming it in one way, someone is naming it in another way? Just to give an example, about a week ago, all your names on Microsoft Teams, some of you had roll numbers in the beginning and followed by name, and some of you had only names. There was no roll number in the display. Now maybe I don't know who, someone told you or it was on your own, but today all your names are such that first it is roll numbers and then names. So that is some form of a consistency, and this is more to do with human beings and less to do with the computer, but this is something which is one of the things that we look for in the MIS, that every time we look at a particular element, that is a student, we should get consistent, either only name or roll number and name, but it should not be a mix that 10 students are keeping it like this, another 10 are keeping it something like this, then another 5 are keeping a nickname, someone is putting their address instead of name. So that is not consistent. So that is one more expectation. Next is completeness. So are we all keeping the data that is complete, or is it only partial? Validity. So this is a concept we will learn more about in the third module, that data should be valid. For example, no human being that I know has a name which is a number. Like I don't know a human being named 75 or 355. So we know that all names are alphanumeric. I'm sorry, not numeric, just alphabets. They are words, proper nouns, right? So that is one thing which is which goes for validity. That whenever a system is recording a name, it should not record a number. It should record a name. Similarly, date of birth has to be a number. So that is what we mean by validity. Timeliness is the data that I am keeping in my MIS. Is it recorded on time and being made available to me on time? So timeliness depends, the definition depends on situation to situation. Sometimes we may need data once in a month, or even if it is delayed by a day or two, it's okay. But if you are dealing, working on the shop floor, sorry, not shop floor, the floor of a stock market, where trades are being happening every second and every minute, then I might probably need my data almost at an instant. I ask for it and next second it should be on my screen. So that's the definition of timeliness when needed. So sometimes it's okay to wait for data for a day or two, but sometimes it is not. Lastly, accessible. I have data, but is it readable? Is it comprehensible? Can I understand it? Can I use it? Or is it just those server farms where tons of data is available, but I cannot really make use of it? So that's the last thing that I need to see. Next, we look at what it takes to provide those quality expectations, or give the MIS that the managers deserve. So and this is more to do with best practices. So I have about 6 points. How different organizations manage their IT. So number one, they keep some form of an IT policy, also called as information policy, that what kind of information will be stored, what kind of information will be given to which level of people, who will be responsible for recording data, who will be responsible for sort of processing it, and who can use it, who can access it, and all that. So this is, and sometimes it goes a step beyond and talks about who gets internet access and who doesn't get, and what will be the login, what will be the password, and all that. So we'll talk about that as we go along. Another thing which is linked to all of this is the organization's quality policy, what we call as the quality management system, ISO and CMM and so on. So that also is helpful because it sets the expectations in a document about what is expected from the MIS, what kind of quality expected, what is the quality of data, when it is needed, and all that. Service levels. So this is an important concept. I would like you to give your thoughts first about what it means by service levels and then come back. So service levels are basically agreements or levels defined about what kind of service will be provided with what certainty. So typically we see that if you go to a bank and you are in a queue, so the banks may decide that nobody will wait for more than half an hour in a queue. So that is the kind of service level that they are promising. There is a WhatsApp forward, I don't know how true or false it is, that when you go to a toll booth on a highway and if the queue is longer than 1 kilometer, then you don't have to pay the toll. I don't know whether it is true or false, but that is an example of a service level. Usually service levels are also associated with a percentage of times in which they will hold true. So when I gave the example of banks and half an hour, they say that for 95% of the customers we will meet this, because there may be some exceptional times when this does not hold true and someone may have to wait for more than half an hour. So let's take that half an hour to another situation, that is pizza delivery, where also they promise that they will deliver in half an hour, but it doesn't happen always. So they also say that in 95% of the times they will not be able, they will be able to give it in 30 minutes, but 5% of the times they may not. And in such times they are ready to give the pizza for free. So that's an example of a service level. It is not only the half an hour, but how many customers. So I will provide half an hour delivery for 95% of my customers. That is one example of service level. Someone may say that I provide pizza within 1 hour, but 99% of my customers. So that's another example of service level. These need to be set, when my mail gets sent out, or if I am downloading a 100 MB file, by when will I be able to get it? Or simply, if I am opening my email, what percentage of time will it be available. So typically most good systems operate at what is called as class 2 and class 3 facilities, which have 99%, 99.9%, 99.99% uptime. Even 99.9% means that in a year your servers will be down for a few hours. So that is one thing we have to keep in mind. For example, this week earlier we had the Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram all were down for good 4-5 hours. So that happens once in 5 years, once in 10 years. Even if you are at a 99.9999% service level facility, you may still see a few hours of outage every decade. So that's one thing we have to keep in mind. Next is the security policy, which decides how often you need to change passwords, who gets access, whether the server will be accessible from outside the organization or not. All these things are decided in the information security policy. There are again standards for this, something called as ISO, I think. I forget the number, but yeah, there are these standards and certifications for that. Next is business continuity. Suppose because of some calamity, or an earthquake happens, or a terrorist attack happens, or some such thing, fire happens, your entire network is down, your server has burnt out or damaged beyond repair. Now how do you get back to business? So that is your business continuity plan or risk management plans. We have a chapter dedicated to this later in the semester, where we'll talk more about it. Basically, how do you get your systems back running after disaster? And lastly, outsourcing. That is another way organizations manage these days, increasingly so. For instance, Airtel does not manage their own IT. They outsource it. GE, where I worked, they had outsourced it to TCS. Most government departments outsource their IT operations to different private firms. The most famous in recent times is Infosys getting the income tax portal, which has been still having bugs after 3-4 months of rollout. So, but that is an example of outsourcing of the IT function of an organization. Mainly, this happens from two reasons. One is that the cost may be cheaper outside, and secondly, you may not have the specialists who can take care of IT. So, a government income tax department can never run the programming and software and all that. So they rely on a company that is specialized in that, right? And this happens world over. So this is how organizations manage IT, so that the IT fulfills the expectations that have been set. Now I will try to merge the technology and the management part, and we'll see what we try to sort of design. So this is taken from ISO 25010, and it talks about some of the desirable attributes of a system. So number one is, we want the system to be functionally suitable. That means it should do what it is supposed to do. Let us take an example of a retail point of sale. You are going for billing, and the system is trying to do the billing. So it should be complete, correct, and appropriate. That means completeness means it should be able to give me all functions of billing. It's not that out of the 1000 SKUs that I have, only 500 are on the system, other 500 I have to do manual billing. So that is not complete. Or the system allows the sale of packaged goods but not loose goods. So I can buy anything which comes in a ready-made package, but I cannot buy let us say half a kg of tomatoes. So that is not a completeness. Then the system is incomplete. Next is correctness. Obviously, when I'm buying potatoes, it should tell me that I'm buying potatoes and not tomatoes or something else. And appropriateness. So for a point of sale terminal, I don't need any jazzy graphics or any a touch screen and so on and so forth. I may be okay with some of the basic functional things. So that's what means appropriateness. I may not have to take something excess or something too short. So it should be just right. The word there is what we call as elegant solution, something which perfectly fits my requirements. Next is performance efficiency. So it should give me a good performance. So for example, response time, it should help me create bill faster than a manual person would do. If it is taking longer than a manual person, then probably it's not performing up to the mark. And secondly, capacity. So it should be able to sort of run sufficient transactions that I would otherwise do. Next is usability. The end user should be able to learn it quickly. There should not be a need for a 6-month training for such a simple system. Error protection. So even if a user makes a mistake, that should get sort of caught by the system. For example, users may make a mistake, like I'll continue with the barcode example, the point of sale example. If I am presenting a barcode, then it should, even if I am presenting a little tilted or like this or like that, it should still be able to take it. It should be able to handle the errors. Aesthetics, which means it should be pleasing and usable. I'll come to this a little later. Next is Rahul Dravid, Mr. Dependable. So it should be a reliable system, and reliability I measure in 2 ways. One is availability and second is fault tolerance. Availability means whenever I need it, it should be available. Goes back to our previous slide, service level. So I expect it to be available for 99% of the time, it should be available. And every user will expect actually 100% performance. So then how do I marry these two? Next is fault tolerance, that even in difficult situations, suppose there is a power cut, suppose someone spills water or cold drink on the system, on your keyboard or on your CPU, still it should continue to function. Rahul Dravid doesn't say that, okay, it rained 1 hour ago and therefore I got out, so don't blame me for that. So that's the kind of a fault tolerance that we are expecting from a system. We also expect a certain level of security, that is integrity of data and the system itself, and confidentiality of data. And then there are all these other things. The system should be portable, manageable. I should be able to port it and handle it. Compatible. Tomorrow, suppose my network changes. Instead of a wired internet, I am going for a wireless internet, or I am switching from provider A to provider B. My rest of the system should continue to function. Or if I am changing the operating system, or if I am changing the mouse, and it should not be like suddenly things stop working. So it should be compatible, it should be interoperable, that is also similar to that. But yeah, interoperability means my system 1 should work with my system 2. So that's interoperability. Scalability, right now I am operating from 3 or 4 locations. Tomorrow when I start 10 new locations, it should be scalable. I should not require again a large number of a huge investment, or starting the programming from scratch. That should not happen. So lastly, that elegance, which is basically everything put together. So what we are looking for is an elegant solution, something which is just right and just what the state of the art, the technology currently allows us to make. So that is what we mean by an elegant solution, which is just perfect without excess spending, but it fits the bill very nicely. It fits all my requirements very nicely. That is the elegant solution. So I'll stop this video with this. We'll be discussing all the questions and everything in a short time. Please go through that Moodle questionnaire as well.